A very, very good day to all of our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk. I can imagine that some of you are waiting for the continuation of this program. Last week, we were talking with Dr. Douglas Street, and he is back with us today. We're going to continue the discussion from where we left off. We ended talking about some foods that contribute to inflammation. And right after we pray, we will pick up that discussion. Please bow your heads with me if you're able to. Eternal Father and Lord God, we pray that you will be with us as we go into our discourse for today. We ask for your wisdom, your grace, and your guidance. In Jesus' name, amen. So, Dr. Street, good afternoon again, and welcome to Let's Talk. We are delighted that you're back with us. Last week, we were talking too, I believe we ended the program last week on the matter of flowers. Not flowers as in things that grow in plants now, but the flour that people use, white flour. And you were making the point that pasta and is better in terms of absorption than white flour. When I say better, I mean absorbed slower. And one of the principles you shared with us last week is that the slower the absorption rate, the better for the body. I want to jump in there and ask you about another set of foods. And so that is trans fats, which is another thing on the list. It's one of the things that I discovered we ought to avoid. Some of our listeners may not quite understand what this is. So can you explain what trans fats are?
All right. So thank you very much, Pastor. Thanks for having me again, and and good day to your listeners and viewers. Okay, so I say we're looking at some principles, and so let's just look at fats. It's a kind of technical discussion, to be honest with you. I don't know if I want to really go into too much detail. But because it has to do with the chemical structure, which of course a lot of persons may not really have that understanding about chemistry to really process that information. But it's just important to understand that fat, it can be changed, right? The fat can be changed. The structure of it can be changed by certain processes. And the changes that might occur are not usually so healthy. So what happens is that there are the fats that come from animals tend to be solid, right? They tend to be solid. The fats that come from plants tend to be liquid at room temperature. And the reason for that is the building blocks of the fat, they have more connections in the animal-based fat than in the plant-based fat. And that's what allows them to be liquid. We're going to use the analogy that we used earlier about somebody holding your hands. Now, let us say that you have 4 hands. Let us just say that you have 4 hands, right? The carbon that is in the animal-based fat is attached to 4 other connections, right? But in the plant-based fat, it may be connected to just 2 other. So there's a difference between the animal one and the plant one. So I said the animal has 4, it may have 4, but the plant may have only 2. And that causes the fat in the animals to be more dense, and it will form a solid. Now, sometimes what they do is that they take the plant-based ones, and they give them more connections. So even though they're connected to 2, they break the connection so that it can be attached to 2 more, right? And that actually makes it more solid. So they would do that when they are, for example, using an oil to make into a margarine, right? Because the margarine would be solid. They take the oil, they change it chemically to make it solid. But that process, when they change it in that way, the fat that is produced is oftentimes unhealthy. So you find that those processes cause what we call the trans fat, and trans fat triggers inflammation inside of your body.
So the when you pick up a label, you may see trans fats or you may see hydrogenated fats. So
Yes,
that the matter of adding the hydrogens
that's right.
to make it solid,
That's right.
so that at
So
room
that's
temperature.
so
Yeah.
so so, so the process of hydrogenation,
Mhm.
that is what generally produces the trans fats. But it doesn't always produce trans fats, but it can.
But while we're on this,
Mhm.
again, every now and then I may have a footnote because um, it's important, I believe. So there is a discussion that I typically hear about, uh, given that we're talking about margarine, we're talking about, the principle therefore would be that uh, things that naturally, fats we're talking about, fats that naturally would be solid at room temperature may not be the best option for you.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
But then coconut oil is also solid at room temperature in most cases. So, but is there a difference with this one?
All right. So coconut oil is not usually solid at room temperature. It can be solid if the temperature is dropped. So in an environment, for example, if you're in a supermarket which is air conditioned, you
Mhm.
find that it may form solid. But if you take it out and put it in your house, which is room temperature, then you find that it turns to liquid. All
Okay.
right. So so you mentioned about food that are fried as being one of the things that triggers inflammation. So that's another principle that I'd want to really speak to you about. What are the rule of fats? Are they healthy or are they unhealthy? All right. So the first principle is go for the plant-based oils, the plant-based fats. That's the first thing, or rather than the animal-based ones. So the plant-based ones tend to be healthier. That's one principle. The next principle is it should be unadulterated. It should not be changed from the original form, right? Must be in its original form, unadulterated, right? That's another principle. Third thing is that you should have the oil in the preheated stage. Let me explain that. When you heat oils, it changes the structure to one that is not healthy, right? So what we're saying is that you should try get your oils virgin, right? So that's why it's important to get your oils virgin, right? So, and it brings me to the whole discussion about coconut oil, right? Um, there's a difference between palm oil and coconut oil. Oftentimes they are lumped together. Coconut oil is actually or can be healthy, but palm oil is not healthy, right? That's one thing. The next thing is you should not heat your coconut oil. It should be virgin and it should not be heated. That's the other thing. When you heat your coconut oil, you can cause it to become unhealthy. So the process of extracting it from the coconut should be one that uses no heat or minimal heat. So it should be cold pressed. So it should be squeezed out of the coconut rather than boiled or than heated out, right? And you should not use it to cook. Your coconut oil should not be used as a means of cooking. It should be a food. So you put it in your plate rather than to put it in your pot, right? You add it to your food when you're going to eat it rather than to heat it, H-E-A-T, right? And the other principle with fats is best to get them, the best way to get your fats is in their original state. So again, with coconut, the best way to have your coconut oil is to eat the coconut itself, right? Avocado also, nuts, the best way to have them is in the original form, in the food that they come from, right? So those are some principles that I can use to, when it comes on to having, your fats, your dietary fats.
Okay, so let me go back to you gave several principles, and I appreciate you sharing the principles because principles can then be applied as opposed to you speaking to one specific situation. So one of the principles you said is that the oil should be unadulterated. And then you mentioned it should be cold press. So I take it that the matter of I was going to ask you, but how do I know? I go into a supermarket, I can see something says cold press, but how do I know that the oil is unadulterated?
All right, so usually, usually unadulterated oil is used to prepare or as a part of your food. So for example, shortening is adulterated, right? And that may be used to cook certain foods. So usually you don't find it adulterated free like that. It's usually used as a part of another food, right? So like the milk substitutes, they call them the creamers. Creamers tend to contain trans fats. Cookies and those things, though the oils that are used are usually processed oil. So those are not, that's why it's not really healthy to have those things because of the process. That's one of the reasons why it is not so good. And the icing and so on, those fats are usually adulterated, right? So you don't get the adulterated ones just like that. It's usually as part of a food. And I just want to mention also, by the same principle, your nuts should be raw. When you bake your nuts, the heat damages the oil that is in the nut, right? So you should have your nuts raw rather than have them baked or roasted.
Very well. Very useful information. I want to stay on oils a little bit, right? You go to a supermarket, there are lots of oils there. Now, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, you should use olive oil. I see. So I want to talk about three common oils. There's olive oil, there's extra virgin olive oil, and there is cold press. You may see on the olive oil, first cold press. And then beside that, you may see pure olive oil. Now, my take is the pure olive oil, maybe olive oil, but that may mean that it has the process of extraction involved heat, I'm assuming, which is different from the cold press olive oil. So is that correct? And then there's another popular oil, canola oil, there's maize or corn oil, soybean oil. So help us in selecting what's good for us and what's not good for us, because these are all plant-based oils.
Yes. All right, good question. All right, so the problem with the corn oil and the soybean oil is that it is what we call a polyunsaturated fat, right? Polyunsaturated fat. Polyunsaturated fat, they have some good effects and some bad effects, right? The polyunsaturated fats means that the molecule does not have as much of the hydrogen attached to it. So you have several of the carbons in the chain. So fats are made up of chains of carbon and hydrogen. But in the polyunsaturated fat, you have several of those bonds that are double bonds, right? So as I mentioned before, carbon has 4 hands, right? So those 4 hands can attach to 4 different other molecules, or two may attach to another carbon. So you have two attached to another carbon, and then you have just two others that can be used. In the polyunsaturated fat, you have several of those in the chain. You also have monounsaturated fat, which has only one of such carbon in the molecule, only one. In the poly, you have several, but in the mono, you have one. When you have a polyunsaturated fat, those double bonds can be broken to attach to others. That makes the fat easily reactive to other things, which are not healthy, right? So the soybean oil and the corn oil have several of those, and that is why we don't really recommend them so much, especially when you heat them. They attach to other things that are not good. They are very eager. They are very touchy, right? Right? As opposed to the monounsaturated fat, which has just one. So example of the monounsaturated fat would be olive oil and canola oil, right? So foods that contain a lot of monounsaturated fat are generally better than the polyunsaturated fat, right? So the soybean oil, so the canola oil and the olive oil are usually better than the soybean oil and the corn oil. All right. And I said I said the process of extraction is important. So you have different ways in which you extract oil from your food. The cold press is the best one. So there's no heat, but there are some types. So when you see virgin oil, there's a minimal heat, but there's some heat, right? There is some heat. But when you have the extra virgin oil, they don't use any heat at all with the extra virgin oil. That's a true cold press. That's the difference between extra virgin and virgin. So the extra virgin is a bit better than the virgin.
Okay, great. I read somewhere.
There's one more thing I want to just mention. One of the problems with oils, though, is that there is oftentimes fraud that is used. So sometimes you may find some companies, they claim that they're virgin or extra virgin when they are not. That's another complication as well. So you find somebody, so you may go into the supermarket and find a cheap extra virgin oil, cheap virgin oil. Usually it is not, unfortunately. False claim. So try not to go for the cheapest one that you see, because you may not be getting what you're paying for.
Okay.
That's another important thing to remember.
That's very important. That's very important, because you may be thinking that, well, I got a good deal here, but really it's not. Okay. It's unfortunate, however. It's a pity that we can't have a way of testing them to see whether or not. Yeah. Is there a reason why the extra virgin olive, for example, olive oil tends to be darker in color than the other olive oil?
Yes, the reason for that is that you get more of the components of the olive in the oil, so it looks greener.
Okay.
It's that olive green.
Okay.
Yeah, and those are antioxidants, which are very good for your circulation and inflammation on a whole. So which is why you should use them. Now, and one of the sad things that happen is that a lot of persons tend to use this oil and they cook with it. It's really doesn't make any sense for you to take extra virgin oil and cook with it, because you're paying for a premium product, which was extracted without heat, and then you're heating it. So the same thing that you're paying for, you're actually getting rid of the benefits that you're getting from that oil. You understand? So it should use it directly on your food, like sprinkle your vegetables or sprinkle your food with it, but don't cook it.
Well, maybe we need to go to this matter of cooking with oil, and whether or not, so the again, I'm going to go back to childhood, because a lot of knowledge that is available now was not available then. And people back then tended to cook with a lot of oil. So you actually saw the grease settling at the bottom of the pot, which I kind of appreciate is rather unhealthy. So in terms of cooking, um, how much oil should we use? Is there a guide or
Um, no, not really. I would say minimal amounts. So I wouldn't say that you have to avoid it totally, but minimal amounts. Um, so I would probably not cook with olive oil because olive oil is fragile, it burns easily. If you're going to cook with oil, I would more recommend like canola oil. Canola oil is more stable than olive oil. So you can use the canola oil for, if you have to do any cooking with it, you use the canola oil. That's a better option to go with. And the canola oil doesn't really have much of a taste either. Olive oil has a strong flavor, which some persons like and some don't like. So the olive oil the canola oil is a better option in terms of cooking, but small amounts.
now some items get a bad rap in the press. You know, I read some information on canola oil. I question it, of course. But essentially, the article was saying it's really not good. It's something that is manufactured. It's not natural, etc. I don't know if you ever came across anything like that, but you're pretty clear that canola oil is a relatively healthy product.
Right. Now, canola oil, I've looked up the information and I have not seen anything credible yet to indicate to me that canola oil is generally not healthy. The information is, one of the things about this issue about oils is that there is a lot of politics involved in it, unfortunately. So it's not just a matter of health, and that affects food a lot, unfortunately. There's a lot of politics involved in discussions. So oftentimes persons don't really get the correct information. But I have not really seen any credible information. The information that I see, you see anecdotal information. So you say, oh, this person used canola oil and this happened to them. That's not evidence of anything at all, you know? And that's what I find with the evidence against canola oil. I've not seen anything credible against it so far. And when you look at the construction of it, again, it's a chemically sound construction, if you want to call it that. And the name canola oil is not the name of the source of it. It's not the name of the plant. So if you hear coconut oil, you know it's from coconut. Olive oil comes from, but there's no food called canola. Right? There's no such food. The canola oil, it's what it comes from is something called rapeseed, which is not a very nice word to use. So you don't really find the term being used. So they use the word canola oil, which is because it comes from Canada, right? So that's where the can comes from in canola oil, Canada, right? But aside apart from the name, I haven't really seen anything else that indicate that it is unhealthy. The one thing which may concern a little bit was that I believe that the process is a heat-based one, right? I believe it's a process that is a heat-based one. So I've never seen virgin canola oil. I suspect it may exist, but I've never seen anything labeled virgin canola oil. But as I mentioned, canola oil is one that is very heat stable, which is why at this point in time, I would not tell a person to not use it. I would say the olive oil, extra virgin olive oil is probably the best one, to use. But I wouldn't say I'll tell a person don't use canola oil because I haven't really seen any credible evidence against it.
All right.
And I just want to mention also, while we're on oils, there's a lot of, again, bad press about coconut oil. again, I've done some digging into it. The problem is with the heat-based, the one that is extracted by heat. That one is, which is the general one. But the virgin coconut oil, based on my research, based on my reading, based on my assessment of it, that one is almost as good as the olive oil, right? The virgin olive oil. So the virgin coconut oil is okay, but the one that is normally extracted by heat is not okay. That is the one that usually causes the problems, not the virgin one.
And I hear you saying that these cold pressed oils, you should eat and not heat.
Yes.
I like that distinction. All right. Well, let's stick with oil, not for the purpose of the chemistry behind it, the chemical composition, but with what people generally tend to do with them. And that is deep frying. So deep frying is another practice that is common even among Seventh-day Adventists. And I'm saying among Seventh-day Adventists because we have a health message that details how we should live, how we should function. A very solid, sound, well-structured health message. But unfortunately, most of us ignore it. So what does deep frying do to the body?
Okay, so fats tend to get a lot of bad press, and for good reason, but a lot of it has to do with how we use it. So when you deep fry, our foods, you're heating, generally speaking, this is all that is used over and over and over again. So you're continuing to use it. And so all the oil, gets into the surfaces that you're having. And of course, it's heated oil, which is heated oil is generally not good, right? Because especially certain ones like the soybean and also the corn oil, because I said because of the instability of it, it becomes breaks down and forms unhealthy substances quite easily, right? So that's why it's not really good to have those. Now, when you heat the oil, it causes inflammation to develop inside your body, and that is really the problem with those oils. They trigger a lot of inflammation, and that causes a problem. As a matter of fact, I was watching some information recently, which says that the increasing use of these, of these oils, cooked oils, seems to have been a major factor in the development of chronic illnesses, things like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. And it's based on that research that was done. It may even have a greater impact than even, for example, consumption of meat. So it has a really, really significant impact on health, apparently, which a lot of persons don't really realize. But it's a very, very important issue. And it's something that we need to adopt into our lives because it may be having more effect than you really realize. No, I'm not sure if I'm preempting you, but with all of this negative information, is there any good use for oils in our diets? And I would say definitely yes, right? But as I said, follow the principles that we spoke about. First, the best way to have your oil is in your food. So your coconut, best to have it in its raw state, right? Avocado, your nuts. So have the foods in their natural states. The good thing about fats is that they are energy dense, so you don't have to have as much of it to get the calories that you need. So you can actually eat less if you have foods with a lot of the healthy plant-based fats, right? Second thing that why they are good is that they slow down the absorption of nutrients from your intestines, right? Now remember, the faster your food is absorbed, is the more inflammation it generates. When you have healthy fats, it slows down the absorption. So less inflammation. What does that do? You get hungry less easily, so you eat less, right? You eat less food, you eat less frequently, which is important for your health, right? If you are diabetic, it's very good to have those foods like avocado, nuts, coconut, and so on, raw coconut, because it helps to slow down the absorption of your food. And it's an important strategy in keeping your blood sugar controlled when you have those kind of foods, right? Because there's no sugar and there is slow absorption of what you have. The healthy fats also reduce inflammation in your body. So these are foods that you definitely should have as a regular part of your diet, whether you have a chronic illness or not. And even if you are trying to lose weight, right? Because fats are important for the absorption of certain nutrients as well, like vitamin D. Vitamins A, D, E, and K require fat to be absorbed into your body. So fat should not be eliminated from your body. Choose the right fats, don't cook it, and have it and have it in its natural state.
Okay, important stuff here. I want to slip back to um, another practice. I'm talking about some common practices that we engage in. But before I move on to that, so the idea you're saying therefore that this matter of reusing oil is just outright unhealthy.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yes.
And as much as possible, we should avoid deep frying and the like.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Um, Now, there's another practice that is pretty common. Well, in my travels, I've seen it a lot of places. I'm not going to say everywhere, but I've seen it a lot of places. I'm talking about grilling, barbecue. Um, and so when you barbecue certain kinds of meats, I understand that it aids in inflammation in the body, particularly because of the smoke and the chemicals that are produced. The meat drops certain things. Just expand on that for us, please.
Okay. So one of the important principles, as I mentioned before, is the amount of heat that is used to cook your food, right? The more heat that is used, is a more harmful substances are formed. How you prepare your food is important. When you barbecue and broil, what you find is that you have the food in direct contact with your source of heat, right? When you have these very high temperatures being applied to your food, especially meats, it produces harmful substances which can sometimes be carcinogens or promoting cancer, right? So when you have these high temperatures, it can cause a whole lot of problems, not just inflammation. Yes, it can do that, but also cancer-causing compounds can be formed when you have so much heat being applied directly to your food. So that is another reason why you'd not want to really be using that method of cooking.
So you don't want the food directly on the heat source.
No.
Okay, wonderful. I want to go back to something else. Perhaps, I like the concepts of sharing principles, right? So you just said that we should be careful how we prepare our food. The more heat, the more the effects, the negative effects.
Yes.
There is something called a pressure cooker. So you have some chickpeas or you have some, let's say, red beans, and it speeds up the process. You put it in the pressure cooker, you put it on, and it reduces the cooking time. Is that better or worse than soaking your beans overnight and then boiling it for an hour or so? What is better?
That's a good question. I mean, off the top of my head, I've never really done any research on that, to be honest with you. That's a good guess. It's something important to look into. But just from the principles, I think it would be not difficult to see where the heat from the pressure cooker may break down some of the fiber that is in the beans. But in terms of doing actual, research to see whether it makes a big difference, I've never really done that, to be honest. But it may be healthier to cook it without it. Um, uh, so that's something that we probably can look at another time. But it, I don't think though that the heat is as much as you would have, for example, with roasting. It wouldn't be of that same level. So I wouldn't tell a person that they should not do that. And I mean, it's a little difficult sometimes because I mean, cooking those peas can take a long time.
Mhm.
It can take hours to cook them if you don't use a pressure cooker. So I wouldn't tell a person don't use pressure cooker. I would say that. And I think when all is considered, it might be the most efficient way of preparing your food.
Okay, so there's something I noticed that you have said or hinted at repeatedly last week, the previous week, and now today again. And that is the value of scientific information, proper documented research in helping to guide our practice rather than just theorizing. Can you, I mean, I didn't ask you this before, but I'm just observing, I'm listening to you, and you on a number of occasions have said, listen, the research shows this, or the research shows that. How important, how, and we are Seventh-day Adventists. We have a health message. Some persons may say, well, why bother with research? We have a health message. How significant is it, and how does it fit into the health message that we have, the matter of scientific research?
Very important question, Pastor. No, I just want to make, quotes one of our health leaders, Dr. Frank Genius, the Intermedical Division Health Director. He made a statement at some years ago. I was part of a teaching session. He said, the Adventist health message is based on 3 pillars: the Bible, Ellen White's writings, and scientific research. Now, a lot of times persons focus the health message on Ellen White. And there's nothing wrong with listening to the health message that Ellen White spoke about. However, Ellen White herself was guided by scientific research, even back in her day. Over the period of her ministry, there are certain advice that she changed based on scientific research, scientific development during that time. And we're not going to go into the details of that, but you'll see that should have changed some of the counsel that she gave based on scientific research. Scientific research, we have a concept in the Adventist Church called present truth. And I don't think there's really any greater application of that than in the health message. Health is a science. It is a science. Science advances. Science is changed by research. Truth in science is assessed by experimentation. That's how you know whether something is true or not. You don't just come up with an idea. Some things may sound logical, but you have to test it to see whether it is true or not. That is how you establish truth in science. So research shows you whether something actually, is good or not. So it's important for us to follow research. There are a lot of things that would not have, a lot of information that would not have been available during that time which is available now. An example of that is the intestinal microbiome, the impact that intestinal microbiome has on our health. That information would not have been available during Ellen White's time. They didn't have the technology. Things like doing a pap smear, doing your blood pressure, doing your blood sugar. Those things would not have been available during those times. The technology was not there. So it's important for us to look at the health message and, of course, look at it in a holistic view. There are some things, though, that medical practitioners may teach that may not be consistent with our health message, right? So, for example, the use of coffee. We, of course, don't encourage the use of coffee, but you do find some scientific research that may suggest that it's something that you should do, right? So it's important not to discard the information that comes out from that message. But so make sure that the scientific research is consistent with the health message that we get from Ellen White, and don't discard it information. So everything must work together, because there are pillars. You don't find one pillar working against another. All of them work together to support. So all three must work together to give you the information that you're looking for. They must be consistent.
You know, I think it's important, and I appreciate what you're saying there. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of fanatical ideologies that float around the place. Some persons are outrightly against scientific research, and that is unfortunate. So I really do appreciate the balanced perspective that you're sharing. Now, another interesting thing, though, is that sometimes research can be biased, right?
Yes.
You know, a particular company may want to advance. I've heard, for example, that soy products are bad, and soy has gotten a lot of rap. And sometimes the company that is facilitating the research, that is sponsoring the research, has a particular outcome in mind, and people are not as honest as they ought to be in terms of the interpretation of the data and the application of the data, etc. But while I say that, so let me ask you about soy. Because we're talking about health, we're talking about inflammation, we're dealing with wellness. So there's a lot out there about soy and its effects. And do we swallow all of it, or is some good, some bad?
That's a very good, important question. And you know, I just want us to understand the principle. As I said, don't discard the health message from the Bible and from Ellen White. Don't discard that. It's very, very important to hold to that. No, because you do find sometimes in research, as I said, may not be ideal. So make sure that you stick with that principle. And we speak about principles. Now, soya bean is a healthy food, right? Soya bean is a healthy food. An apple is a healthy food, but apple juice is not a healthy food, right? So when you take out the juice out of the apple, toss away the fiber, it's now unhealthy. When you take out soy protein isolate from out of soybean, soy protein isolate by itself is not healthy. A lot of soy food is processed soy food, and it falls into the same category as processed foods. If you find a food which contains, uses a whole soybean, that is generally healthy. But when you have extracts from the soy, which don't have in the other things in it that mitigate against the negative effects, you have an unhealthy food. A lot of the meat substitutes are processed soy foods. So they should not be a significant part of your diet, right? A lot of the soy drinks are made with soy protein isolate. The problem with soy is the soy protein isolate. That is what is unhealthy because it has been taken out of the soya bean. If you're getting a soy drink, for example, it's best to get one which uses the whole soya bean. You do have a few soy drinks that are made from the whole soya bean. So look at the ingredient. When you're buying a soy drink, for example, look at the ingredient. If you see soy protein isolate, put it aside. If you see the whole soya bean, that is one that you can choose.
Very wise counsel. I'm torn between what I should ask you in the remaining time that we have, but let's talk a little bit about generally. I just want to ask you to give me some examples of anti-inflammatory foods.
Okay.
Because we talk a lot about things that can give us inflammation. There may be things that are anti-inflammatory. So can you give us some examples?
Okay. So let us go to principles, right? So first of all, you want to look at the different components of your diet. Make sure that you get a good mixture of vegetables, right variety, your greens, your orange, your reds. You get vegetables, get colors. The colorful ones are good. Get them fresh. Best to have them uncooked. Some of them you can cook, like your broccoli and so on, but even your broccoli can be consumed raw, right? So have as much of your vegetables uncooked as possible. Vegetables should make up at least 30% of your diet, right? 30%, right? And I recommend that you have your vegetables not as with your first meal, but probably your second or third meal, right? Second and third meal, right? Have fruits. Fruits should make up about 20%. And that should best that you consume with your breakfast, not before or after breakfast, but with your breakfast, right? Because the other components of the food will reduce the absorption of the sugar that is in it. And have the whole fruit and not the juice. Juice is not healthy. Fruit juices are not healthy. So have your fruits, wide variety. Try to get the ones that have less sugar, especially if you're diabetic. Try and go for the ones that have a lower sugar content, like the berries and so on, right? Those ones are better. And the ones that are less ripe, right? The riper it is, less fiber, more sugar. So have the ones that are less ripe. And those ones are better to use. Your carbohydrates, have the complex carbohydrates, the whole complex carbohydrates, right? The grains and so on. So we spoke about flour. There are some types of flour that are good. Rye flour is good. Spelt flour is also good. Wheat flour, not so good. Whole wheat is better than the white, but still it's best to go with spelt or rye. Those types of flours are okay, right? Whole grains, your oats, best to use your old-fashioned oats or your
Old oats.
steel cut oats, right? If you use rolled oats, don't cook it. Have your rolled oats raw. Don't cook your rolled oats, right? Because the glycemic index goes up, right? And I said, try not to bake certain foods like your like your sweet potato and so on. Use the low glycemic carbohydrates. Low glycemic carbohydrates. Whole grains, low glycemic carbohydrates, those ones are better to use. And I said, be careful about how you cook them. Make sure you have your peas and beans, nuts and seeds as well, right? In the beans, the peas, the nuts and seeds should be raw, not cooked, not baked. But of course, the peas, you have to cook those, right? And try not to eat too frequent meals, right? So snacking should be avoided, right? Snacking should be avoided. There's no such thing as healthy snacking, right? Best to have your meals, 2 or most 3 meals per day. And the earlier you have your calories, it's better. So get most of your calories from your breakfast and not from the later meals. So your breakfast should be your main meal, and then the other meals should be smaller. 2 is better than 3 for a lot of people, right? So it's best to go for 2 meals rather than 3, and try to complete your eating as early as possible. So try not to eat anything after 6. 4 is better, 2 is better. So the earlier you finish eating for the day is better for you as well. So that's another principle that you have.
For those individuals who say they can't eat breakfast and they eat lunch and then they eat a very heavy supper, that's not the best practice.
No, it's not the best practice, because what happens is that nighttime is when your body does its repairs. When you put a lot of food in the system, it's hard for your body to repair itself properly. It's like asking your mechanic to fix your car while you're driving it, right?
Okay.
It doesn't really work. Nighttime is for repair, right? Your daytime is for processing food. Sometimes persons develop those practices because of work and so on. It's not the best. And another thing that you have to keep in mind is that the way that we feel about food, a lot of it has to do with the composition of the bacteria in your intestines. So you may feel like you can't do something because of that. So you have to consciously change your practices over time so that you change the bacteria so you don't feel that way anymore. So in other words, you know your breakfast is your important meal. Start small. Start having something small, and gradually you increase it so that you change how your body is feeling about the food.
Okay, very well. That's very useful. So if I am working a late shift, I get home at 10 p.m. after doing strenuous work and I'm hungry. Um, how how should I relate to that? Looks like you lost me there for a minute. Okay, it does appear that Dr. Street has lost his internet connection. Let's hope that he rejoins us soon. Um, we are talking with Dr. Douglas Street. Our time is almost Street, that is. Our time is almost up. He's gone. We have been talking about diet, food. We started this discussion about inflammation in the diet, and he has shared some very important principles. Most of today, we were looking at foods and food preparation methods, and how we go about preparing our foods for maximum health. One of the things that I just want to reemphasize that he has mentioned is that we should make sure that we avoid heating the oil, but rather we should eat the oil. That is the cold press extra virgin oil. So you can have cold press coconut oil, you can have cold press olive oil. Those he suggested that we should eat and not heat. If you heat it, you are really throwing away the investment that you made in it. He has spoken to us with respect to the challenges associated with some practices like exposing your food to direct heat, as what happens with grilling and with barbecuing. That process causes some carcinogenic elements to seep into the food, and it's generally not good for you, produces inflammation in the body. He has also shared with us that it is important that we consider foods that are anti-inflammatory. He has suggested that you want to make sure that your breakfast is he's coming back with us now. Want to make sure that your breakfast is the most important meal of the day. and you should get your calories early as opposed to later in the day. Dr. Street, you're back with us.
Yes.
We do understand the challenges of technology sometimes.
Yes.
When you left us, I believe I had asked you about the well, you had just completed talking about the anti-inflammatory foods. And I wanted to ask you as a follow-up. There are some, I wanted you to talk about supplementation. Um, benefits. I've seen a lot that says, listen, the vitamin industry and all of this is a money-making thing. What guides should we, or principles, you have been using the word principle, what principles should we employ when we look at supplements?
Okay. Very important question. So the principles, again, there are certain vitamins which you can take, and I'm just list. Vitamin D is one that I would recommend that you use. Vitamin C, you can, but the thing about vitamin C is that vitamin C, if you look on a football team, right? Football team has different persons. You have the goalkeeper, you have the forward, and so on. Everybody on the team is important. The vitamin C is like the striker, right? But the striker needs all other persons for the team to work effectively. So vitamin C doesn't really work that well by itself. It needs the rest of the team. The fruits will contain the rest of the team, right? So it's best to have, if you're gonna purchase a vitamin C supplement, it doesn't have to be a high dose vitamin C. You can take one that is 500 or 200. You don't have to take the ones with 1,000. It's not really necessary for you to get that amount of vitamin C. All right. And choose the ones which contain the natural ingredients like rose hips or those things. So the ones that contain the natural ingredients, those are the ones to really go for. The straight vitamin C, I would really recommend those. Right? Get the ones with the rose hips and those other things, the bioflavonoids, you will see that on it. Right. So use those. Ones are most effective. So the other principle is try to use the ones that are as close to their natural state as possible, right? Your vitamin E is one of those. You have to be careful with the vitamin E, right? Best to get the vitamin E from a natural source, either one that has been taken from out of the natural source or from the food itself, like your nuts. Nuts contain a lot of vitamin E. So it's when you're going for vitamin E, it's best to have it from your nuts, right? Because sometimes when you get one, it can affect how your body processes it because there's a different members of the vitamin E family. And when you get too much of one, it can counteract the effect of the others. You understand? So it's best to get your vitamin E from your food. The other thing is, let me give you some examples of some natural ones you can use. Turmeric is a fairly decent supplement you can use. You can get it in natural state or you can get it from a supplement. Ginger also, you can do that. Another one of my favorites, reishi mushroom, reishi mushroom. Reishi mushroom is a very good supplement. It has a lot of positive properties. It can have good effects on your nervous system and your immune system. So it's a very good supplement to be taking for a wide range of different illnesses because of the general effects that it has. And the other principle is get a reputable brand because some brands have other components in them that sometimes they don't even tell you that they are there, right? They may be neutral or even have a negative effect on you. Some are adulterated. Some may not even have what they say that they have in there. So you may buy a supplement, something which says reishi mushroom, and there's no reishi mushroom at all in it, or very little, right?
Okay.
So don't go for the cheapest one that you can find, right? And always make sure you check the reviews, because sometimes that is important to find out if it's a good brand or not, right? So get a reputable brand, get one that is as close to nature as possible. And yeah, that's a usually, good way. So, but like vitamins, you have to be careful, because the ones that are man-made are not so good. Apart from the vitamin D and so on, those are okay. But like supplements like selenium and so on, that is not a good supplement for you to be taking. Selenium is good for your body, but as a supplement, it is not. It's best to get it from the food, like garlic and so on, rather than to get it as a supplement. So best to get those nutrients from the food that they have, rather than have them as a supplement.
Well, thank you so much, Doc. Our time has expired. I want to just express profound appreciation to you. There are lots of questions, and I will arrange to have a session where we respond to the many questions that our viewers have. Again, we appreciate you spending these 3 weeks sharing with us. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to more interactions in the future. God bless.
Thank you, Pastor. My pleasure.